What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Andy, if you haven't already been here. A couple of weeks ago I asked some of you guys on Twitter and Instagram to ask me some questions that you guys wanted me to answer as far as like spirituality, yoga, meditation, astrology, literally anything in the book. I was down to answer it. So I've got some of the questions here, so I'm going to go through that with you guys and do a quick little Q&A. That way you guys kind of get to know me a little bit better, know a little bit about my spiritual practice a little bit deeper, and yeah. The first question that I got asked was, what is your sun sign, your moon sign, and your rising? I am a Virgo with a Taurus moon and I have a Pisces rising. That's why I come off as mystical and metaphysical. Another question that I got asked is, how long have you been studying astrology and was it hard for you to start doing readings for others? I've been doing astrology for almost 3 years now. I got into it when one of my other friends got into it. She actually introduced me to it. She'd been studying a little bit longer than I had, and she kind of introduced me to all of like the basic concepts. I started doing readings when I felt more comfortable doing my own and getting into my own chart, and when I kind of like figured out all of the planets and the houses, that was when I was like, okay, like I think that I could actually like do this and like start helping other people just know the basics. I still don't really like dive super deep into astrology. I feel like I got what I needed out of it and I used it as like a tool and a vessel to like kind of help me just notice my own patterns a little bit better and kind of understand myself on a deeper level. I felt like I didn't really relate with anything that anybody posted about being a Virgo, so I was like, okay, like I know that there has to be something like deeper. And when she introduced me to astrology, I was just like, okay, like this makes a lot more sense. Like this is why I act like this in this situation. This is why I love the way that I do. The next question is, what was the pivotal moment that caused you to dive deeper into your spiritual journey? You know, I feel like there was a lot of moments where I was like, I need to just get it together. Like, do you ever have those moments where you're just like, it's not necessarily like one moment either, like one thing that causes that moment, but it's just like the compilation of all of these different things that just like smack you at one time. And I felt like that's exactly what happened to me. Like I was just like in this place where I was super negative. I didn't really have like conscious direction. I didn't really know where I was going in life. I was kind of lost in a sense. I didn't really know who I was. I didn't really have like the energy or the desire to like get to know myself on a deeper level, and that reflected in my life. I didn't really care to know about the people around me. I didn't really care to develop those personal relationships with anybody else, and I think that it's because I didn't really have a personal relationship with myself. So when I started to take that time for myself, I noticed that people really weren't into that. I mean, I was coming from a space where I wasn't into that, so it's no surprise that the people around me weren't trying to dive deeper into themselves. And so when I started to do that and I started to notice that the people around me who had called me friends for years or who had been around for a while kind of just fled and did their own thing, that was when I realized, okay, like I need to do something. I need to have faith in something. I need to start to understand life a little bit more. I was also in a really bad place with some of my family members at the time, and I had just held a lot of grief and a lot of anger for a lot of my family, and so I felt like I needed to address it. I needed to stop playing the victim and stop, you know, acting like my life was perfect when really it wasn't, and it needed some adjusting, and I cleared a lot of space, I feel like, in that time. And so when I started my spiritual journey, I very much was in a place like rock bottom. Like, you know, when you just hit rock bottom, I feel like I was in that place and I needed to go up. And I started reading spirituality books, really like self-help books and self-transformation books was where it all started. And then gradually I was just drawn to different things that opened up different doors for me, and here I am 3 years later, a yoga teacher. I feel personally like I'm a spiritual advocate. I definitely think that had I not had a lot of the moments that led me up to that point, leading me up to rock bottom, I wouldn't have been able to say I'm ready. You know, I'm ready to dive into myself. I'm ready to trust life and just let it kind of guide me where it needs to go. And I think that diving deeper into myself was one of the best decisions that I made for myself, and I totally 100% stand by it because I feel like I've turned into a really awesome person. And this other person asked me, how do you mix readings, crystals, astrology, chakras, and Christianity? I feel like this is a question that I get pretty commonly, if not something about Christianity and like mixing different things with it. And really, I just do it. I kind of took some time to study different religions religions, and I had heard other people speak about religions and what they had kind of studied. And I kind of started to put together that all religions basically kind of came to one conclusion. It was a lot easier for me to put my faith into one and to decide where I wanted to call my spiritual home. And yes, right now I do go to a Christian church every week on Wednesday and Sunday, or just Wednesdays if I can. But once a week I really try and go to church. And I just think that that's where I came from. I grew up Christian and I grew up Catholic. I was mostly raised in a Christian home, and that's where those are my roots, you know. That's where I find that communion with God, and that's where I find that time to be able to worship with God. But I do also believe in a lot of other things. I've also opened up my perspective to a lot of different things as far as like crystals, astrology, meditation. I feel like sometimes secular religion can kind of teach that those things are bad, and personally in my own experience I've never had anything bad happen to me by just reading my birth chart or by doing yoga or by, you know, looking into crystals. I've never had a bad experience. In fact, when I did start to work with crystal healing, I had a lot of healing take place. And yes, you are faced with ego, and I can see how people would think that that's bad, but you're faced with yourself. You're faced with your darkest parts of yourself. And I think that on the path of discovering yourself, that's really important part to face, because just as there's good in the world, there's evil in the world as well. And when you become aware of that duality, you begin to transcend that duality and you see everything as one. Everything comes from one source. No matter if you're atheist or no matter what religion you believe in, everything comes from a source, right? Christianity is the story of Jesus, but at the same time, Jesus also came from the source, God. And so that's kind of how I'm able to mix everything. Like I said, I just do. And if others are receptive and they're open to that, and I can inspire them to kind of do their own thing while still having one faith, then I think that that's a really awesome thing to be able to do. I noticed that when I was a little bit more closed off, I was very ignorant to a lot of the healing that can actually take place by doing those things. I'm in no way saying that you should depend on these things. I personally have used them in my life as a tool. My communication and my union with God is mine and God's. That's not something that I feel like I need to answer to anybody about. So if I can go into a Christian church and get that unity and feel that peace and feel that oneness, then that's what I'm gonna do. I also go into Buddhist temples and I feel the same thing. And so I think that when you kind of open your perspective to exploring those different avenues, you can really resonate with what's right for you. And I've always been that type of person that I'm like, I feel like you have to learn who you are not in order to really come into the person that you are. And so I've learned who I'm not, and I've learned that I'm not somebody who just has a secular religion. I've learned that I'm just very open to a lot of different avenues and a lot of different modalities that life in general just has to offer me. And so when I kind of blend all of this together, I just do it. I just do it intuitively, and I do what feels right for me. And I encourage you guys to do the same. The question after that was, is it hard to balance those things? And if I allow other people's perspectives to kind of get in the way, then yes, it can be a little bit hard for me, because then somebody's like, oh, well, you shouldn't be doing this because it's the devil, or you shouldn't, you know, if I let those perspectives get into my mind, then I have to really step myself back and remember, like, how do I feel when I do certain things? Do I feel that loving energy and that loving presence that is God, or do I not feel that? And any time that I don't feel that, I remove myself from that situation. And I notice that I feel that when people try and throw their judgment at what I do with my life. I'm very much a person that I don't feel the need to try and change anybody else's life. I'm just here to share my experiences and that I've encountered through my spiritual practice and my spiritual journey, in hopes that it can encourage others, or that others can see eye to eye with me, and we can find different links between, you know, different things that I study versus what somebody else studies. I'm not the type of person that shoos somebody else's knowledge away. In fact, I genuinely love to get to know what people believe and where their spirituality comes from and where they feel God. This next question is, how has your relationship with Jesus changed you, the way that you see yourself and the world around you? When I developed a closer relationship with Jesus, it was after I had left and came back to the church. And I did this more comfortably because I had learned through different spiritual practice that other people do call on certain deities. And in the Hindu religion, they call on different gods and goddesses. And in other religions, it's somebody else that they put at the center of their being. And personally for me, I resonate more with Jesus. That's who I kind of put at the forefront of my spiritual practice. And I do believe that when you're trying to worship something, it's really nice to have something tangible. Personally for me, I feel like Jesus specifically has showed me different miracles in my life where I am guided to work with him and I am guided to work with only him. And that's just my own perspective. I've known people that Kali comes to them, or Krishna comes to them, or Ganesha comes to them, and that's beautiful. If you can have something, if you can have a connection with spirit like that, to where something like that comes to you in a physical form, then I think that that's a beautiful thing to be able to experience. And I just happen to resonate with God. And so I feel like when I developed that relationship with him in a more conscious way, it really allowed me to open up to the unconditional love and to the compassion that he did teach, and allowed me to dive into his scriptures and really understand myself on a deeper level. But I also feel like I can do that within different religions. For instance, right now for this yoga school that I'm about to go to, I have to read some Hindu text, and I'm able to see the correlation between that and the story of Jesus. And so it really just comforts me to remember that everything comes from one source, and I personally believe that it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. As long as you're open, as long as you're a loving and compassionate human being, I don't think that anybody else's religion or what they believe should be something that anybody should judge on. If there is one source and one creator, then when we die and we go back to that space, that's who you're gonna face. And personally, I don't believe that God is this person in heaven saying, I'm gonna damn you to hell for something that you do. I genuinely think that God has transcended that. God has transcended good and evil. God has transcended time. And so when I remember that, and I read scripture in the Bible that allows me to remember that, or scriptures in Hindu texts even that help me to remember that, then I can come back to that space of non-ego and just allow truth to be truth. I believe that there are many different paths to one source, because there are many different people having this human experience right here and right now, but we all come from the same place. And so that's just my personal belief, and that's something that resonates with me, something that I've developed through experience. So before kind of making any gestures or judgments on your own path, I suggest just looking into yourself and what resonates with you, what calls to you. If it's one religion, then okay, but if it's more than that, that's okay too. This other person said, I've been using the law of attraction for a few weeks now, and at first I started to see results, but now I'm getting frustrated and I feel like things aren't manifesting as they should. This is something that I love to talk about. The law of attraction, especially the way that it's being portrayed now in the spiritual community and like this new age community that's kind of coming around, there's no substance behind it. There's no energy behind it. People are like, yeah, what you think about, you bring about. Just focus on what you want and you're gonna have that. Like, no, that's not how it works. In a perfect world, in a instant manifestation world, that would be awesome, but we are not God. We are not in that time. We are not in that space where we can just immediately manifest something. It just doesn't work like that. And if something doesn't resonate with you, no matter how hard you think about it, it's not gonna come into your field. And so I think that that's something really important to remember when you're thinking about the law of attraction, or you're trying to work with the law of attraction. It's something so much more broad. You have to have true emotion behind it, and it has to really feed that source. It has to be a true passion in order for that to really open up for you. And you have to put a lot of energy, a lot of emotion behind it. Yeah, it may be something that just comes to you and teaches you that you don't need it, but still, these are these things that you're drawing into you. I think a lot of people like to say that the law of attraction just brings in good to your life, when really it brings in the good and the bad. It brings in exactly what you're projecting out. So if I'm projecting out that I want to travel, but then I'm not really looking into anything else as far as travel, then it's not going to work for me. If that's just something that's in the back of my mind, then that's not something that's going to come really into fruition until I start practicing it. So yes, saying that I want to travel, but then looking up places to travel, looking at things to do in those places, kind of getting in that mindset. You have to really put an emotion behind the law of attraction in order for it to really work with you. And like I said, sometimes you will draw those things to you that you think that you want, only to experience them and say, actually, that's not something that I want. So the law of attraction is always working, and I think that that's where people are like, oh, it's only working if I'm really focusing on this thought. Like, no, it's something that happens all the time. Every single moment, every single thing that you're experiencing right here and right now is something that you have attracted to you, that has come into your field. It has It has literally mirrored the energy that you're putting out and reflected it back to you. And I know that that's kind of deep, and that's a lot of substance right there, but that's the truth. That's how the law of attraction works. That's the secret. You have to really be able to put energy behind what it is that you want. And not only that, but I've also noticed that you have to have gratitude. Personally, I feel like a lot of people skip the whole gratitude part, and they're just going into instantly like what they want without being grateful for everything that they've already manifested. Like, in order for me to have a bigger house, for instance, I live in an apartment. Let's say I want to manifest a bigger house. In order for me to manifest that, I have to really start looking at different houses. I really have to start putting myself in the perspective of a house, but I also have to be extremely thankful for the house that I do have, the apartment that I do have, the apartment that I do live in, and all of the means that it took me to get there, all of the experiences that led up to get all of the experiences that have led up to me getting there, I have to be grateful for, whether I liked them or whether I didn't. That's not how it works. The law of attraction solely focuses on the energy that you're putting out in that instant moment. So yeah, I know I got pretty deep with that one, but I feel like that one just hits the core, because the law of attraction, I feel like, is something that I'm constantly getting asked about, or I'm constantly finding myself in some type of defense about. I'm just like, dude, like, yes, what you think about, you bring about, but at the same time, you have to have emotion behind that. So if you're always in fear that something's gonna happen to you, and then something happens to you, whether it's minor or not, you kind of attracted that, right? Because that's where your field is. That's what you're focused on. You're focused on that fear. So the more that you can take out the things that you don't want, like fear, anxiety, stress, anger, when you can start to take that stuff out of your field, that stuff stops coming into your field. I used to really be a stressed out, angry person, and once I started taking out these things that made me angry and addressing them if I needed to, it made it a lot easier for me to clear that out of my field, so I could be like, okay, this is now what I want to draw into my field. So yeah, law of attraction, it's great stuff. That was the last question, so thank you to anybody who sent in questions. I really liked answering questions. I don't know what it is, but I like answering questions about myself. I don't know if that makes me conceited, but I definitely, I don't know. But I liked that. I liked answering questions, so maybe I'll do another one in the future. If you guys like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and if you aren't already, subscribe to my channel. If you want to, hit the little bell notification, that way you know anytime that I post a video. It really helps me out a lot, because then that gives me an idea of who's kind of resonating with my content. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you guys have a great day, night, whatever it is, make it awesome.